to wait for your schools to pick the platform and begin to train yourselves up in that there. And again, communicating and talking with each other and trying to link into the experts is kind of the way that we've been going. But we are, I'm not saying stumbling along blindly, we're not doing that, but there is huge scope here for upskilling ourselves and learning from everybody. But sorry, nothing so much from the Glow groups.
Hi.
Sorry, can I ask everyone to make sure that they're on mute, please? Getting a wee bit of background noise there. Thank you. Just one other thing that I would suggest. I mean, there should be local authority ICT support, IT support, who should be able to advise around very specific issues like that. So if a school is experiencing difficulty in you know, in any aspect of managing a platform, then that should be you know, a call to the local authority based IT support. So I would recommend that as well. I don't know that we've got any questions yet from this group, but feel free please to put them into the chat, and Rob's going to do some sort of like diverting of the questions towards me. But there was one that appeared, or an issue that appeared in the main session around a person who had repeatedly asked for suitable hardware in order to be able to deliver blended remote learning, you know, some kind of model of digital learning, and hasn't been provided that by the local authority. And of course that Anne's advice, that, you know, the EIS advice is that the local authority should be providing anything that is required to maintain continuity of provision. So Jane, would you have any advice in relation to that? You're obviously a member of the Glasgow Committee of Management. What's happened in Glasgow to you know, facilitate the provision of the necessary hardware to people who are being asked to work using digital means?
Well, you know, in Glasgow we've rolled out the iPads, and they came in quite quickly, and I know there are still some issues in various schools. I can speak really from my own point of view, that we've all got that, and it works with Teams and Shobi for our, we don't have anybody in my particular school just now using blended learning or shielding at home, but certainly I know that the iPads have been useful too. We've also, we would go straight to our digital leaders of learning to help us with that, with any particular questions. And also, certainly if we were coming up against a brick wall, we would use our local association. I would go to Susan and put questions there if there was difficulty with hardware, especially getting it to our members who are out there shielding and having to work from home. But with Glasgow, certainly we have the iPads. I know it's happening elsewhere too, but certainly not across Scotland.
Any insights there from Education Scotland colleagues, perhaps in relation to maybe how RICS could support around that kind of difficulty?
I mean, I think Jane's probably covered it there. I think really going, you know, speaking to the school and speaking to the local authority and you know, making sure they really know what it is they're looking for, I think is the first protocol, definitely.
Okay, thanks very much. I think I would echo what you've said there. You know, if the issue is raised with the head teacher and the head teacher isn't able to, you know, to get the local authority to supply the necessary devices or you know, access to data, you know, whatever the particular issue is, then it is a matter that should be raised with the local association secretary, because part of the discussions that take place at the local negotiating committee, you know, as Anne referred to several times in her presentation, you know, part of this whole conversation around digital provision should feature what's gonna occur to enable teachers to be able to provide it, you know, if they happen to be working from home, either because they're self-isolating or because a school's had to go into you know, a kind of blended learning or partial or full closure mode. So these should have been elements of the conversation that would take place at LNCT, and if they haven't already, then questions from individual members in individual schools are likely to prompt those discussions at local level, which would resolve matters for a, you know, for a larger number of people beyond that. So that's a good call, Jane. Rob's put something here. It's a kind of adaptation from a a primary member, but it could apply to the secondary context also. And it's in relation to just how you balance this, I suppose the allocation of time between teaching in class and providing some kind of online learning for young people who are self-isolating at home, and how that sort of like interfaces with the 22.5 hours maximum class contact time. So that's probably a kind of terms and conditions question, which Jane, you might want to respond to.
Yeah, I think certainly I feel that sometimes that our school WTAs may have to be revisited, to build time in for this. Just now, I can speak from personal experience at a local level. We've negotiated things like, and it has just been departmental. This is not going WTA yet, but I can see it going that way. We've negotiated to get departmental time back. And add it into our preparation time. But if this begins to grow, especially tier 4, and it begins to grow exponentially, I think that working time agreements will have to be revisited to have time built in for that, because it will grow. There's a lot of stuff that people will want to. I mean, I don't want to go into all the, are you putting up homework and just coursework to complete, or are you recording lessons, to go online? But there's the scope for all of that in there. I think I go back to my earlier point that there is a vast scope here for learning, and also finding time to develop the work and get it on your particular platform. And it was certainly what my department were speaking about with each other today, that there is concern that if it goes, that we will have to have the time to develop. It's not just a matter of putting classroom resources on, it's a matter of developing so it's useful for online delivery. But certainly WTAs, I think, would have to be looked at for the time to be picked up there, yeah.
Absolutely, Jane. I mean, I think it all comes down to collegiate discussion, doesn't it? And what the school priorities are. And if a school priority is to deliver some remote learning to young people who are self-isolating, then in order for that to be of good enough quality, time has to be invested in that. And if time's being invested in that, then something else has to make way for that. And I suppose it kind of fits in with the guidance that came from Education Scotland and Scottish Government around education recovery and what the priority should be around that. Maybe Education Scotland colleagues would like to comment a little bit in relation to education recovery and the principles around that.
I would agree with what Jane just said there. I think it would be a conversation for colleagues to have with their manager, their management teams, because different schools will be in different positions, and different locations and localities will have different requirements.
Okay, thanks, Kirsty. Okay, another question. There was just a kind of follow-up maybe from the discussion about access to hardware as provided by the local authority, and a question about are long-term supply teachers entitled to hardware also. I think that we would, just say, quite straightforwardly that anybody who's been asked to deliver remote learning, regardless of the status of their contracts, should be provided the necessary devices or access to data by the local authority. And again, LNCT discussions would incorporate all workers, no matter what their employment status is. Okay, a question here about, sorry, I've scrolled too far down now. Let me get it to go back. Oh.
What one is it?
I've just scrolled wrongly.
Same here, I'm scrolling down.
Are you scrolling?
Okay,
yes, so again, this is another question around the use of devices. So how can I respond to a local authority when they have asked me to use personal devices as a better option than employer supplied hardware? Well, Jane, do you want to comment on that one?
Well, I think our advice is quite clear in that we shouldn't be using personal devices and we should be provided with the hardware. I know I'm speaking to teachers that you do what you have to do, and if you're working on your laptop at home, that's what you do, but you should not be asked to do that. It should not be put to you that your device is better. We should be holding out. We should all have the hardware to be able to provide any type of digital learning as part of our work. So I would say, no, you push back. Don't be told that you have to use your own device at all.
Absolutely, the EIS guidance is quite clear on that there should be no compulsion to use your own devices. Some people might prefer to do that, and you know, if there's the appropriate security and if it's appropriately compatible with the platforms and the programs that are being used, then well and good if people want to do that. But certainly there should be no question of being compelled to do it. And again, that would be a matter to raise with the school rep and possibly probably the local association secretary, actually, if the pressure was coming from the local authority for people to do that. That's one that could be resolved through discussion at that level. Okay, I'm rolling to see if there's anything else. Okay, we don't have anything else going to Rob via the chat. Does anybody have any other questions at the moment? Any other burning questions before we go back to the main room? Ronnie?
Can I ask you a question? It's about health and safety. I used to attend health and safety meetings in North Lanarkshire, and because of all the cuts, there's been almost nothing over the past 3 years. And they used to go on about limiting the amount of access that pupils had to screens, whether it be during class time or in the evening. Now, is there any advice as to how much time we should spend looking at screens as part of their job, or pupils should? I'm thinking particularly when you have them doing remote learning, if they're going to be watching a screen all day and maybe doing some homework by looking up websites, maybe doing some research if they're really keen, and then they've got their own social things to do and they're watching TV, they're watching an awful lot of screens. And I know that recently the emphasis has been on the blue light coming from screens, which they seem to have sorted to a certain extent, but I'm not sure whether we've had any guidance on using large screens, even using the boards in classes. You know, I mean, what's the current state of affairs in that? Something we in North Lanarkshire have had no feedback in that for a long time from the local authority, whatever research they do, if any. And I'm not sure whether the EIS has done research on it. I think somebody should be doing something. They used to say restrict it to 2 hours during the day if you can, but I've heard nothing for, say, half a dozen years on that.
Yeah, I think there are two things in there, Ronnie. I think there's the health and safety question, but there's also the question of pedagogy. And I'll maybe ask Education Scotland colleagues to say something about the pedagogy dimension of that, and then Jane and I will respond to the health and safety aspect of it. So,
yeah.
Kirsty?
Yeah, I think there has been, and there is on some, and I can share. I'll find some of the links to some of the research that's been done on that. There's no specific time being given to anything. There's kind of in terms of, you know, even UK government research that's been done, there's no specific times been done on that, but I think I would go back to and this is on the pedagogical side rather than on the practitioner side. I go back to something that Anne said as well. You know, as part of this, there is blended learning does not mean everything is online, you know, and I think that's the key thing to remember there, that, you know, you might be giving tasks, that might be your communication method to a learner, but it's not, you know, it's not that it needs to be online. In fact, you know, certainly with younger learners as well, we would definitely not, you know, you wouldn't want to. I've got an 8-year-old, you wouldn't want him to be doing that. So I think that's something that has got, you know, is to remember as well, that it's not an assumption that all of that is online, and to make sure that there's a balance there. So yeah. Thanks, Kirsty. Jane, anything?
Yeah, and I'm very much going back to what Anne said in our presentation at the beginning, that we've got to remember there's all sorts of different types of blended learning. Certainly I can speak from my point of view. I know we were all in the same position just before the holidays, when we thought we were all going to be in blended learning. I think many schools had their plans in place, and we were very, very clear that along with the face-to-face, that we would put on activities, but they would be activities that kids could go off and do. I grant for what Ronnie's saying, often that is screen time. but peeling some second-year girls away from any screens has been quite difficult. I'm sure my secondary colleagues will agree there. And it is a bit glib to say that, but I'd rather they were looking at my activity than some of the things that they have been looking at, you know. But certainly, and we did do a lot of, before the kids went away, packing them off with packages. They do like to do that better, you know, and maybe even, you know, you printed off copies. I've known staff members just to post stuff through the post to some of their classes. But yeah, I think we would be focusing a lot on the activities, sending the kids off to do something themselves, and to limit the amount of screen time that Ronnie so rightly brought up. And I know that has been an issue for us, and one that was under discussion at AGM was the great big idea of the amount of screen time and what advice we'll be going to get. But I know things have snowballed and taken that over a wee bit, but it is certainly something to be borne in mind still.
Certainly early on, Ronnie, early on in the lockdown, we did signal to members and, you know, from their own perspectives, but also from the perspectives of young people, that they shouldn't be spending whole days, they shouldn't be spending 22.5 hours a week class contact time on screen. You know, that would be a you know, a health and
for
safety.
eyes and posture and RSI, various reasons.
Yeah. So listen, guys, we're out of time. Thanks very much for your questions, and thanks very much to Kirsty, and to Jane for their responses to those questions. But we better get back, because as you know, Susan is quite a taskmaster when it comes to sticking to time. So I'll see you back in the main room, okay?
Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye now.